welcome back to part 2 of the World Cup of books. It has been a heavy set of matches so far from groups A and B. We do have a winner from each one. I just ate a penalty kick, so now my mouth is covered in chocolate. Very, very terrible idea. But we have our winners from Group A and Group B. Now let's move on to Groups C and D, and let's see where we go with this World Cup. So Group C, moving on, we have a huge team in world rankings at spot of 43. Remember, the higher number, the better. In terms of options for potential players that you can choose from for this tournament. So we have England versus South Korea, the recent translation literary darling. Everyone wants to read South Korean literature these days. Let's see if they bring out the big guns. So let's start. England, who are they bringing? England is bringing, a major classic. This is going to be hard. This is going to be hard to beat. England brings out A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Could you get a bigger, better team than that? A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. The great classics. Everyone has read this, wants to read this, has an opinion about it, whether they like it or not. People know this book. They know what it is. They know the first line. It was the worst of times. It was the best of times. It is super famous. So South Korea is going to have to pull out the big guns. And South Korea pulls out Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Nam-Joo. I'm actually quite happy with that choice because you know what the other option was The Vegetarian by Hong Kong, and I hated that book. So we're very happy that The Vegetarian did not show up. But let's be realistic. Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, was a really fascinating book about that really showed the basically what everyone in South Korea has to go through, what their life is how their life is basically planned for them just because they are a woman. When they are a small child, they are made to they are told to, what's the word, oh my goodness, I know the word in English, I mean Japanese, but I can't think of the word in English, to subdue their own emotions and actions and learn to even like practice, if they have brothers, practice on the brothers to be a proper feminine lady. And when they grow up, they are taught how to cook, how to clean, to take charge of the household. They are taught not to be too ambitious, because if they're too ambitious, well, they'll be disappointed when they go to college and then have to leave immediately once they're married. So it's really a story about the hardships, the standards that South Korean women have to go through to just because of the country they were born in. So now you're challenging that against A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which really is just, I mean, it's a classic because I mean the prose, the scenario, just France versus the hardships in France and whatnot. I mean, you can't really get better than A Tale of Two Cities. And I'm actually going to choose A Tale of Two Cities. I know that's a little bit stereotypical, but the thing with the South Korean book is that even though I recommend it and I enjoyed it, the thing is though, it doesn't read enough as fiction. It reads too much as nonfiction. And because of that, it is very interesting if you were to read it as sort of a nonfiction, as sort of a what's the word? Not sartorialized, but no, maybe sartorialized is the right word. Maybe dressed up is what I'm looking like. It's kind of like a dressed up nonfiction. And so if you're reading it more as a pure fiction, it's not really as interesting. There's no story, there's no plot, there's nothing goes through. So because of that, I am going to go for Charles Dickens. That definitely has a plot, definitely has a lot of emotions going through with it. It's a different kind of emotion, it's a different kind of hardship, but I have to go with Charles Dickens. So Charles Dickens pulls England through the next round. Next battle is going to be Colombia versus Peru. So we have a little Spanish language battle coming through. A little Central South America action, which is very interesting. Let's see what comes up. Okay, so as I expected, we have Colombia being represented by Gabriel Garcia Marquez with 100 Years of Solitude. Could this be more famous of a book? But Peru's coming up with Pantaleón y las Visitadoras by Mario Vargas Llosa. This book is translated as Captain Pantoja and the Secret Service. And that book I absolutely loved. I loved it more than 100 Years of Solitude. So I'm going to tell you right now, Mario Vargas Llosa wins this round. Captain Pantoja and the Secret Service is an amazing book. I laughed out loud. It was hilarious. But it's a hilarious with this very, very cruel background. So basically what it's about, Captain Pantoja is asked by the Peruvian army to create a prostitution camp. Basically, he's asked to create basically a brothel in the middle of the forest with these prostitutes so that they're available for the soldiers. Now, the funny thing about this story is the fact that obviously, how does one hire prostitutes? What are the qualifications that prostitutes need to have? What sort of resources do they need? What kind of accommodations do they need? Like, what should I ask of them? Can I ask them how much, how far, like, should we set prices? Should everything be for free? So there's a lot of humor and there's a lot of dark comedy that comes with this situation. But you can't forget that we are in the middle of a very troublesome period in Peru that makes this what seems like a very lighthearted subject, but like things like we realize there's a reason these soldiers need, in quotation marks, but there's a reason they need prostitutes. They need that release of tension. You need to provide soldiers with the ability to forget the world that they are in, which is a world where they are fighting for this particular cause. So yeah, Peru, easy win over 100 Years of Solitude, at least for me. I really wish Mario Vargas Llosa was more pushed because he is absolutely amazing. Definitely recommend his works. So yeah, Captain Pantoja and the Secret Service, Pantaleon y las Visitadoras wins hands down for me. I know that's a shock for you guys, but Peru takes this round. So now let's move on to Group D, where we have another heavy set. France. France has a world ranking of 145. I am French. If you are new to this channel, I am French. I have a heavy bias to French literature. It's fantastic. There's romance, there's adventure, there's swashbuckling, there's serious historical fiction, there's beautiful prose, there's funny prose, there are plays. There's just, France has this rich history of literature, and it's a world of literature that once you dip your toes into, you are in the ocean. You are going to swim for the rest of your life because there's so much to get to. And France is going against Kenya, from which I've only read one book. So we'll see, like, which book from France did the random number generator choose. Let's find out. Oh no! It chose nothing, which means I forgot to do the random number generator. Let's take a quick water break while I figure out which book from France is going to move on. Wait, please. All right, we are back from that short intermission, and you will never believe me. I can hardly believe it. The selection from France that the random number generation chose is Vaurien Voleur Assassin by Raymond Essy. Now, this one is tough, and I'm going to tell you why. This is a book that out of the entire Library Thing website, I don't use Goodreads, I use Library Thing, which I highly recommend, but out of the book, I am the only one who owns this book. This is a book no one's heard about. Like, did all the players get injured from France and you just can't come to the World Cup? Did you decide to sleep? I don't know what to do with this. So Vaurien Voleur Assassin is this tiny book. It's like barely even 100 pages, if I remember correctly. And it basically, the title means, Vaurien means like good for nothings. Voleur means robbers, and assassins, well, assassins. And basically what this book is about is the Vauriens, the voleurs, and the assassins of France decide one day that they are going on strike. And they do. And the whole book is showing what happens to a society when there are no bad people to do bad things. And so the whole book, the cops start losing their jobs because they have nothing to do. Firefighters lose their jobs because they have nothing to do. Bureaucrats lose their job because they have nothing to do. And basically the laws of France collapse because of now. Well, laws are to prevent these things, but there's nothing to do anymore now that they're on strike. So that's what the book is about. Again, no one's ever read this. I I don't know what to do with this information, but that's who France decided to bring to this tournament. So let's move on to Kenya's representative, which is strong. It's The River Between by Ngugi Thiong'o. Ngugi Thiong'o is one of the most famous Kenyan authors. If you read from Kenya, you're going to read from him. And The River Between is this amazing, also very short novel. But it's basically about a man who is split between two sides of his own tribe, where one tribe is wanting to accept this new Christian religion while the other tribe is saying, no, we are our tribe. If you accept the Christian religion, then you're no longer part of these people. So it's this young man who's torn between the two because he's the only one who seems to be able to understand both sides of the equation, while the others are very much reluctant to find any sort of compromise or to come to any sort of understanding. And so because of that, with the depth of the topic and the prose, I mean, the Voyant, like, I have to be honest, the French one was actually super interesting, but no one knows about it, and I just don't know what to do with that book. So Kenya is going to take this round. Kenya is moving on. Shocking. What a result. But that is what is so amazing about a World Cup. You never know what will happen. So next, the final game is North Korea versus Italy. And the reason I'm looking to my left because I have all of the information on my computer to my left. And shocking result. North Korea, newsflash, breaking news, North Korea has been disqualified for cheating because they only brought nonfiction into the game. And nonfiction is explicitly not allowed because you cannot compare nonfiction to fiction. It just doesn't work. So North Korea has been disqualified. That means Italy, who only has a world ranking of 6, will move on with their choice, which is The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante. Very, very lucky for Elena Ferrante, because with my disliking of that book, or my finding that book quite mediocre, who knows if, who knows how far they will get into this tournament, because it's just not looking very good. So yeah, out of disqualification, North Korea is out. Italy moves on. Unlike the real World Cup of soccer, where they didn't even make it to the World Cup. So anyway, moving on to Group E. Heavyweight shows up in Group E. But let's first start with the first game. We have Poland versus Spain. I can't tell you what's going to come out of these two countries. So let's find out. Poland, who has a world ranking of 2, is showing up with Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by the Nobel Prize winner Olga Tokarczuk. And she was going up against world ranking 9 of Miguel de Unamuno by San Manuel Bueno Martir, which is actually a play, and it's a very common play that you read if you study Spanish as a foreigner. It is a play that you very often read in school. I believe I even read this one twice. I read it once in high school, and I read it again in college for my Spanish minor. And to be honest, which one should win? You know what? It's no, to be honest, I know who's going to win. It's going to be the Spanish book, Miguel de Unamuno, San Manuel Bueno Martir, because it is a really, really fascinating play about very strong women in a Spanish household in Spain, and it's just absolutely wonderful. The play is definitely one to read. So Spain takes this round against Poland. So let's move on to the next game in Group E. Again, so this is, I got too excited. I got prematurely excited, but this is what I was getting excited about because we have a heavyweight, Japan. If you follow my channel, you know Japan is the big representative of my channel. I read primarily Japanese fiction, and I read primarily things about Japan because I live in Japan. So, we're going to see. We're going to have Japan versus Russia. And here's the thing. I cannot make this up. Out of all the books that could have been chosen from Japan, because Japan has a world ranking of 252. Those are a lot of options. And I've read about 150 of those books. So there were a lot of options from Japan. And the one book that Japan pulls is the most famous book. The first novel ever written in the world, The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. I could not make this up. I did not do this on purpose. it's, of all the books it chose the biggest classic in the world, The Tale of Genji. And that is going against Anna Strobinet's An Awkward Age, which probably you've never heard of if you heard Russia and you thought Dostoevsky. You heard Russia and you thought Tolstoy. No, it's Anna Strobinets, who is a female writer. And this book, An Awkward Age, is a collection of short stories that are very, very eerie and very, very dark and very quite creepy. Anna Strobinet's An Awkward Age, the title story, An Awkward Age, is about a young boy who is going through an awkward age. And I don't remember how, but ants are involved. And it's the creepiest story I've ever read. So highly recommended. But in terms of this game, the classic's gonna win. I like a long, old classic. And so Japan is gonna go through with The Tale of Genji. I know it's typical. I know you couldn't get more like scripted than that. I mean, people are gonna think this World Cup is scripted. It's not. It's not. It's just a random number generation pulled The Tale of Genji. I have no control. I have no control. No, I do have control, and I chose not to have control because I let random number generation pick. So Japan moves on to the next round. So let's go to Group F. Group F, let's start with the first game. We have China with a world ranking of 36. China is up in my literary darling movement. I want to read everything from China these days. You have followed me with the classics. You've especially followed me with the inability to finish the very last volume, volume 5 of Story of the Stone. For some reason, I just am not picking up that book, but it will happen. It will. I will finish that and move on. But you've been following my Chinese saga. Surprisingly enough, though, the random number generator picked up Balzac et la petite tailleuse chinoise, or Balzac and the little Chinese seamstress by Dai C.J., which is going against Ireland's Melmoth the Wanderer by Charles Maturin. And I'm sorry, China, you are my literary darling, but Charles Maturin, Melmoth the Wanderer, Ireland takes this match because that book is absolutely amazing. Melmoth the Wanderer is about this immortal who wants to lose his immortal status, but to do that he has to take the soul of another person. And Melmoth the Wanderer, the book, is about all these people who have an interaction with Melmoth and what their interaction is. And for me, and well, before I get to for me, but basically the thing that it's interesting about the book, it's kind of like, it's like Russian dolls, where you start off with one person's story and they meet Melmoth, but they also meet someone else, and then that person tells their story and their story, and then you get to the smallest Russian doll and you're like, wait, what happened to the first story? But then we go right backwards again to the original beginning, and you see who Melmoth really is, and you see whether or not he can be stopped or if he should be stopped. But the thing that's amazing about the story is that for me, there is this part in like the middle, and it's the longest part, it's the biggest doll in the Russian dolls, where it really talks about the Catholic system in Spain, and basically the hypocrisy of religion and Catholicism, and the idea of monks being celibate, and the thing about forcing young men to become monks when they don't really want to. So fascinating, beautiful passage. So yeah, Melmoth the Wanderer takes this round. Easy win. So next, we're going to move on to the next battle, which is Norway versus Nigeria. Very interesting pick. Definitely very, very different cultures. And they both have strong picks, though. Norway is at a world ranking of 6, Nigeria at 3. But Norway is coming up. I'm already going to declare the winner before I even tell you what the books are, but this is the winner. Norway comes up with The Ice Palace by Jorge Vesas, and that book is beautiful. And, well, okay, I'm going to tell you, telling you what Nigeria is. Nigeria is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. Fine book, for me, just middle grade. And the thing is, like, Ice Palace is just too beautiful for me. So Stay With Me is about a young Nigerian couple where the woman is having trouble conceiving the child. So she is convinced by her husband's family that he should marry another woman, basically take a second wife, so there can be a child in the family, so that he can extend his family's lineage. It's very good. I still recommend the book people for me, but for me it just felt a little bit mediocre. I think it could have done more. I think it really, for me, I was more interested in the background in terms of what was going up in Nigeria during the story than I was on the focus on the main couple. So for me it felt just a little bit flat, but I still would recommend it. Now, the Ice Palace for me is so beautiful, and it's such a unique story, and it's just told in this way that I just can't forget that book. It's really, it's about the relationship between these two young girls in Norway, and one, they have this really beautiful friendship, but one day this girl disappears. And so you follow the heartbreak of this woman as as this young girl, as she tries to figure out what happened to her new friend. And so you have the beauty of showing the innocence of this relationship, of this friendship, backed by the beauty of the Norwegian landscape, but also the cruelty of the Norwegian landscape. So what seems like this really beautiful landscape can actually hide very, very harsh truths. So yeah, the Ice Palace takes this easily for me. It's a beautiful book. Beautiful book. All right, moving on to Group G. We have 2 more groups in the group stages. So let's get into it. Group G, our first match with tied in the world rankings at 12, we have Chile versus Canada. Chile is represented by Isabel Allende, as I assumed in the first video. But she is bringing her El Zorro, which is her book about Zorro, basically. And she is going against Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. So Isabel Allende and like Margaret Atwood, for me, in terms of like women's fiction, these are giants in women's fiction. They are beautiful authors. They write amazing things. But here's the thing. For me, Margaret Atwood still has so much creativity. All of her books are incredibly unique. They have very, very different plots to one another. She experiments with different genres, and she really brings you into a whole new world. For me, Isabel Allende, while her early works were beautiful and very fascinating, for me, she now follows so much of a script. All of her books are the same thing. It's basically the same woman with the same struggles. It's just a different scene every time. So one time she's on an island, another time she's in a small town here, another time she's here. But it's basically, for me, Isabel Allende, her books now are all kind of the same. And El Zorro was kind of like the last ones that I actually still enjoyed. But the thing is that you can't compare that to Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale has so much present day, like, I mean, it just represents what's going on in society at all times, at any age, at any moment in any country. And it just really represents like the hardships that women have to go through. And the thing, but like also predicting what could happen and what is happening at this time. So The Handmaid's Tale hits hard. You cannot compete with The Handmaid's Tale. Sorry, that book is moving on. And I think it's going to be very, very strong in this tournament. It's going to do some damage. So Group G, after a very fierce match of Chile versus Canada, the last group game in Group G is India versus Vietnam, which is a very, very interesting pick. Not too many people read from India, not too many people read from Vietnam, myself included. India has the lowest world ranking of 1, while Vietnam has a world ranking of 3. And even with the Vietnam one, I believe like there might be a nonfiction in there. But yeah, India is being represented by Le Jeune et le Festin by Anita Desai. Le Jeune et le Festin, so the has been translated into English as Fast and Feasting. And that is going against Roman sans titre, a novel without a title by Duong Tu Huong. And these are 2 books that for me were middle ground. Neither one is a super strong contender, but neither one is exactly a very low contender either. This is really going to be a question of personal preference for me, what topic you're most interested in. And for me, I'm going to go for the Vietnamese one because it is a story about a young man who is asked to find another young man from his old village who might have deserted. So the young man, our protagonist, is a very, very well-respected person in the army. And so for him to go after someone who might have deserted, it really creates this like tension between morals and duty and sense of responsibility, especially when you're using those concepts within the army, and then you're comparing that to those concepts within Vietnamese society, and especially how those morals might contradict each other when you're at war, basically. So yeah, the Vietnamese book wins hands down. Sorry to India, I do need to read more books from your country. And then following Group H, the very last group pulling in for our World Cup of books, we have Australia versus Mexico. Sorry, I wrote Australia. I meant to write Austria. Austria versus Mexico. This should not be Australia twice. I know it was up here, but it's supposed to be Austria, so I will fix that. But yeah, Austria versus Mexico. And this is tough because Austria, for me, has one of my favorite authors, Stefan Zweig, depending on how you're pronouncing it. Stefan Zweig he's one of my favorite authors. He's amazing, and I can't highly recommend him. But yeah, he's coming in with 24 heures de la vie d'une femme, which is 24 hours in the life of a woman, and that is going against Mexico's Un dulce olor a muerte, so The Sweet Smell of Death by Guillermo Arriaga. And this one's just gonna go to Swag. It's just immediately. Now, the Arriaga, the Mexican book, I actually quite enjoyed. Guillermo Arriaga, I believe, if I remember correctly, is actually a Mexican film director, but he does write books. And Un dulce olor a muerte, The Sweet Smell of Death, was about this small village in Mexico and dealings with this, I believe it was one particular death. I read this